Hey my friends, everybody cyclists. My name is Graham Street and I am the owner for Cycle Club membership and the developer for CycloCore training. You're with me here in my Cyclo Trainer studio where I train everyday cyclists from over 70 countries around the world through the internet and DVD and download. And some of my new trainer classes, we're going to be working on utilizing power meters. You have a power meter, or have you thought about getting one, or you're looking to kind of bridge that gap in your performance and you're thinking about investing in one, but you really don't know how to use it or what it really means to use a power meter. Well, today I'm going to show you how to begin to understand the first component of utilizing a power meter in your training, whether it's indoors or of course outdoors, for centuries, races, or just improving your overall performance as an everyday cyclist. It's really important we begin to understand how we're training, and obviously up till now most of us use things like speedometers, cadence meters, and heart rate monitors, and all of these are great devices. They're not necessarily indicative of exactly what we're doing on the bicycle for our actual workload. So today we're going to go over zones 1, 2, 3, sweet spot, and zone 4, kind of like an introduction to understanding the nuts and bolts of power. And then in my second episode here, we'll go over on zone 5, 6, and 7, and then how to break it down and begin to understand how to begin to systemize it. So watch me on the bike real quick. I'm going to show you just a couple things to begin to think about in relation to the initial zones of profiling your power data. Okay, so if you have a power meter or you're thinking about getting one, it's important that you begin to understand how to use it. I think so many of us buy a power meter, spend a lot of money, we get it and say, okay, now what? The first thing you really need to understand is your lactate threshold, which is what they call zone 4, which is kind of like that middle ground, right when your body is working at a really high level of performance and can only sustain it for typically 8 to 20 minutes. And that's where your body begins to break down, that really critical curve that determines just how much performance you're gaining or losing with your training. And if you want to use a power meter, it's critical that you begin to understand that number right away. So when you get your power meter, you ideally want to do a zone 4 testing protocol. Now, if you're a Cycle Club member, if you have some of my DVDs, you want to refer to Cyclo Trainer class number 5, which is zone 4 testing, 2 blocks of helping you begin to isolate your power numbers at your lactate threshold. You can also just do your own test as well on your trainer. Ideally, you're looking to do an 8 to 20 minute protocol. You're basically going as hard as you can for the entire duration of the test without blowing up. And that's where things get complicated. So it's not an easy test to perform. It does make you a little bit uncomfortable. It's not a max test, but definitely a test that is critical for helping you understand the data. Now, once you understand your zone 4 performance, everything else gets easier. So for instance, if I get on my bike today and I know that my L4, let's say, is 340 watts, which it pretty much is. Just tested it just recently. I recommend testing about every 4 to 6 weeks. If I know that that number is at 340 watts, then I can take percentages of that number to kind of dictate what power zone I want to work at for my workout. So if today was an active recovery day, I know that I want to be at about 55% or lower of that wattage. So ideally we're at about 190 watts, 185 watts or lower. So if I want to achieve active recovery and help my body recover, if I tend to drift too high above that number, I'm really skating out of the performance zone that I need to be in to allow my body to recover, right? I think a big mistake a lot of us make is going into a recovery ride and throwing out too much energy. And then we get back to our big critical rides and we're missing out. Active recovery, to be honest with you, from my perspective, is a waste of time. And the reason I say that is that if you're going to do active recovery, I'd rather having you do active recovery with off-the-bike techniques like breathing skills, myofascial release with Cycle Secrets, stretching, yoga. Doing an on-the-bike hour, 2-hour, 190-watt ride doesn't float my boat. Boring as hell. I'd rather use that active recovery between sets of higher intervals. So if I want to raise my rate higher, and I want to work into the next zone, which is zone 2, our endurance zone, that's typically about 60 to 75% of our threshold wattage. So if my threshold is 340 watts, that means an endurance zone 2 workout should hover around 230, 240 watts, right? That means that I should be able to sustain that pace, that wattage, basically indefinitely, in theory. That's that zone that builds on endurance. Now, a lot of everyday cyclists tend to overuse that zone 2. And although it's a critical component to building endurance, as an everyday cyclist, we have to compete with time, work, kids, travel. And although, being able to get on the trainer and do a 4-hour zone 2 workout is plausible for some of us at 2 o'clock in the morning, I wouldn't recommend it. That's why I would recommend spending more time in the zone 3 category, which is what's called tempo. So tempo is like your sustainable working power. So for me, if my LT is 340 watts, my working zone is about 80 to 90% of that. It's a pretty important number right there because that's the number that we're performing in an endurance ride or longer, but we're not breaking down. We're not hitting LT, which is important because once you hit LT, your body begins to break down and suffer with recovery within the ride. So really nailing zone 3 performance is critical. So for me, zone 3 is about 270 to 290 watts. Now again, in theory, if I'm fueling right, hydrating right, I should be able to hold that zone 3 tempo for a pretty long time, sustainable. It's not going to be pleasant, but it's also not going to be so painful that I can't do it. And when you're out on a ride, outside with friends, a group, watch what happens with your power. A lot of people will spend too much time in that zone 3 and not get in what's called the sweet spot. So the sweet spot is a very small window of about 5 to 10 watts between your upper zone 3 and your lactate threshold. That sweet spot right between where I can move my work rate up. I can get myself up to about 290 watts, maybe up to 292, 293. Sounds so small and incremental, but those 3 watts over the course of 50 miles, 100 miles, is a significant improvement in performance. So understanding those critical numbers is key to helping you not throw out too much energy on the wrong ride. It's also key to helping you pinpoint, today, I need to work on my pedal technique, but I also need to isolate zone 3 tempo. So I go on group rides, and I tend to suffer with keeping up with the group past mile 40. Well, maybe you're suffering with that sweet spot area. You can't perform well for a long enough time at your sweet spot. Maybe you can't get to your L4 or slightly above and then come back to your sweet spot and recover properly. A big problem for a lot of us everyday cyclists. Now again, the advantage of a power meter is it gives you really, really good approximations. So today, it's actually a recovery day for me. Usually I wouldn't be on the bike, I'm doing this for you. So for me, I'm tired from a lot of training this week. I mean, a lot of filming, new workouts for Cycle Club, DVD. So if I want to do a workout today, even getting into zone 2 is tiring. So I won't do it. I'll get off the bike. But the power allows me to see that. It allows me to see, I'm struggling to get to 250 today, struggling to get to 300 today. Well, the power meter is telling me, hey, if you're struggling to hover in your zone 3, then why are you training today? You should be resting, eating, hydrating. Come back tomorrow where we can begin to build that power back in, really finite for the kind of workout you're doing. Now, the next session that I give, we're going to talk about how to systemize from L4. We're going to talk about progressing your lactate threshold, moving to VO2 max, working with VO2 max, anaerobic capacity, and neuromuscular capacity. So those more explosive-like movements, sprinter-like movements, we're going to be going over those in the next episode. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you're a Cycle Club member, log in. I got tons of reviews, tons of workouts for you to use with a power meter or not. And I've got new power meter or power trainer sessions coming. If you're not a Cycle Club member, you can join for free. Give a couple workouts a try, see what you think. If you want to use them with a power meter, by all means, do so. If not, you're still going to get a killer workout with me. I hope this has been helpful. I'll see you in the next episode here on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever you're coming to me from. Have a great day. I'll see you in the club.